Thank you. I have my questions on my phone. I'm not looking at my phone, like other stuff. I'm focused on the interview. So anyway, we want to invite Stefan Loeb he's the Vice President of Business Development and First and Final Mile Markets at Norfolk Southern. And in case you hadn't missed it, Stefan, your company's been in the news a little bit recently.
Just a little bit,
Okay,
yes.
We won't be rehashing all of that, which was certainly kind of fun to watch as a spectator. But certainly, I think that what came out of the battle with Ancora, with the activist investor, is that there's going to need to be some changes. There's going to be some changes at Norfolk Southern as a result of this battle. You've got 2 new board directors. I mean, your CEO survived the vote, and the legacy management is still in control of the board. How's Norfolk Southern now going to change?
Yeah, it's a good question, and obviously top of mind for a lot of folks. Really two things that I want to focus on from that. The first is, when you look at what actually happened, it was 3 directors, not 2. So,
3, okay.
but still, what it showed to us is, the strategy of a better way is still sound. It's still very much a part of our future, a crucial part of our future. But what the vote essentially said, and what the shareholders are asking us to do, is to have the board hold us accountable for performance, right? So it's a validation of the strategy. It's a validation of growth and future supply chain, like the focus of this meeting, driven through growth, but still efficiency and safety being very top of mind, and not just being held from a company perspective, but at a board perspective. The shareholders really want to make sure the board is active in holding us to the performance. So those are the 2 takeaways from the whole event for us.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the state of rail. Every November in New York, I attend the Rail Trends Conference, which really almost every CEO attends that conference at one point or another over the course of 2 days. And the rail industry is very interesting to me in the sense that it's really one of America's great freight strengths. I mean, you really don't find it as much as in other countries to have this much freight being moved on rails. It's got legendary names. It gets great photography. People paint pictures of it. And then you go to a conference like Rail Trends, and it's just this self-flagellation of why can't we grow? We never grow. Things don't get any better. But I will tell you that last November at Rail Trends, I definitely sensed a change in sentiment, that things were starting to get better, and possibly this wasn't just a blip, that there had been maybe a structural shift that might result in something as basic measurement as we're now grabbing more market share away from trucks primarily, when we hadn't done so in years. Is there a basis for that? Yeah,
absolutely. And Rail Trends, by the way, is a fantastic conference. If you are interested in the industry, it is. You're not going to find better speakers anywhere than in New York. But what I would say is, look, one of the things, I think it affirms, again, the strategy that I was just mentioning, right? Smart, sustainable growth as part of a better way forward in conjunction with safety and productivity and efficiency. And so, when you look at the broader industry, yes, I think coming off of 20 to 25 years of maximum cost efficiency, you look at, okay, we've taken as much cost out of the network as we can. As you mentioned earlier, it's the most efficient freight in the world, freight rail system in the world by far, right? We move, almost 100 plus car trains, multiple containers. You all know the math that follow the industry. You have to at some point look at the other part of the equation, which is growth. And if you look at the numbers, aside from intermodal stories, which have slowed down a little bit in the past few years, this industry has not grown, particularly in what we call the carload space. So the bulk business, the non-intermodal trailer and container business. And so again, that pivot to growth, which is a term that you've heard a lot of the CEOs say. I won't speak for the whole industry, but I'll speak for Norfolk Southern. That's why, again, with the strategy with Alan Shaw, our CEO, Ed Elkins, our Chief Marketing Officer, one of the reasons they brought me on almost 14 months ago now to create this entity, First and Final Mile Markets, to create solutions to make rail easier, to bring that growth onto the network from a myriad of different places. And so just when you look at, there's never been a department like this before. The 13, 14 months that we've had so far, we've made some great inroads. And so it's really taking that pivot to growth term and turning it into action. And that's really what's been fun here at Norfolk Southern.
But let me ask if there's a conflict going forward, again, coming off the battle with Ancora. Tony Hatch, who is the legendary rail analyst,
Oh, don't be nice to Tony.
yeah, is always the moderator at Rail Trends.
Yep.
He talks about the cult of the OR. And you could almost argue that the Ancora was about the OR at Norfolk Southern. The criticism of the existing management was that its OR was excessive relative primarily to CSX, your East Coast competitor. How do you move forward with growth while you're at the same time being pressured to increase that OR, which could be argued as the best way of accomplishing that, the quickest way certainly, is cost cutting?
Yeah, you can never take your eye off the efficiency and the overall goals of the shareholders, right? And so again, when you look back at the vote, I think that was to my second part of the comment and the first question, is really that really needs to be a focus. You can't lose sight of the profitability and efficiency side of what we're trying to do with growth. But I would argue there are a lot of different tools for doing that. So one of the examples in my space is Norfolk Southern is blessed that we have over 260 connections with short lines. And so these are the small railroads that extend our network, get us to shippers that aren't on Norfolk Southern, and have a tremendous history of growth. And so creating a program in our department that tracks 40 different interchanges where we have identified growth, substantial growth, and making sure that we interchange every single day per the plan and that we're tracking it and fixing it as quickly as possible, leading to tremendous growth, has shown that that's an efficiency gain. We're not marketing, if you will. We're partnering with our transportation and operating teams under that OR structure that you were just mentioning, to focus on consistency to drive growth where we know it is. So that's a program that we launched last July. When you look at the performance, there were just some articles in other publications that came out last week talking about the above market growth we've been able to sustain with that operation. That it's not marketing, it's our team working together with transportation to deliver a good service product.
Let's talk about that. You're talking about the Triple Crown initiative, correct?
No, that's on the trucking side. This is pure
let's talk about Triple Crown.
Okay.
Maybe you could talk about this initiative at Norfolk Southern.
Yeah.
And it involves trucking and brokerage, and I'll let you take the floor and discuss it because you are the head of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things when I came to NS, they said, oh, by the way, you also have Triple Crown. And I was like, well, what's that? And it's like, oh, it's the trucking company. And so Norfolk Southern, historically, for kind of a door-to-door auto parts business and kind of an intermodal dray product, has both asset in Triple Crown and then brokerage and what they called TDIS. Historically, for multiple years, have served the truck markets and the intermodal markets. It's, from my standpoint now, under first and final mile, again, it's an extension of our rail network, and using it not just in intermodal, but looking at it through our transload and terminal business. It's looking at it as a combined package. So a couple months ago, we combined those two entities under one named Triple Crown. So whether you need an actual asset or you need a brokerage option, it's all under one house. So it's easier from a go-to-market strategy. And again, trying to make it easier to use for customers to be able to use Norfolk Southern's rail product in a bundled solution, like many of the other speakers have talked about today, again, to try and grow our business.
Okay, let's come back to the short line, first mile and final mile. What percentage of the freight on the Norfolk Southern Railroad either originates with or ends up in a delivery to a short line railroad?
Yeah, it's a great stat. We're very proud of it. So 40% of our industrial products business touches a short line. And so we think that's probably one of the highest concentrations of business that a Class 1 does with short lines. We're very proud of that. Because again, even though they're a small piece of the rail network that people don't always talk about, they like to talk about the 6 large Class 1s, they have shown over, basically since Staggers Act, since 1980, above grade ability to grow. They punch way outside, their weight class. And so partnering with them, like I mentioned in that interchange project, and figuring out how to grow, that's a very efficient way for Norfolk Southern to grow. They handle all the first and last mile. They handle the interaction and the placement of the car with the customer. All we see is cars at interchange with all the work that's basically been done. We get to use our efficient system on the long haul to get the cars to where they want to go. It is a very crucial strategy to our growth. And again, one that fits right in the efficient focus that our shareholders and our board want to hold us accountable for.
But does it pose a risk if you're under a mandate to change, and I think certainly you are after everything that's just happened, you've got 40% of your miles that touch a short line. What if they're recalcitrant? What if they don't get it? What if they just simply can't go along with the changes that you want to implement? This is it's enough to try to change a culture with your own employees, but essentially you have to maybe try to change a culture with a vast array of companies, and they've got their own culture issues and management issues. How do you bring them along?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think overall you have to understand most of the North American freight network, customers aren't just shipping on one railroad. So the whole network, whether it's a large to small or small to large or large to large interchange, everyone has to work together. I think where a lot of people get off speed, especially from the past, is especially with PSR, is you look at just one railroad. But the fact is, customers look at it as a network, and that's how we should look at it. That's how NS looks at it. So your partners, whether they're big or small, you have to deliver an integrated product. And then from a short line side, I am lucky in that I came from that space, so I got to see across all the railroads what I liked and didn't like as a short line. And then coming over to NS, we've done a really good job tailoring that relationship so it works. And we spent a lot of time on it. So we built a team. We called our field sales team. Clark Reed's in the room here who runs that. We have local sales folks that partner with the short lines to go in and market with the customers, develop business with the customers. And again, like I said, they're local. They are assigned out onto our network. So they integrate not just with the customers in the short lines, but with our local operating people. That is a very special, unique structure for Norfolk Southern that when I came over here, I wanted to amplify and make it really good, and that's what Clark's team's doing. We also have a short line performance team, so we basically have essentially a customer service group that deals with everything else. So if you want to grow, you work with Clark's team, and if you need help, you go to another group. Alex McNeil runs that group under short line performance. So it's very customized approach to improve the relationship, manage the relationship, and most importantly, like you said, if folks get a little wonky, if you will, we can fix those problems and address them very quickly.
I mean, they're all private companies, so it's not like they have to release this information, but do most of the short line railroads have ORs that are roughly in line with where the Class 1s are, or is it a more profitable or less profitable business?
Yeah, I mean, they're private businesses, so what I would say is they have the flexibility to operate the way their owners want them to, and that is different math than how publicly traded companies and shareholders are viewed. So what I would say is, and that's one of the reasons why partnering with them is so important, because they may have a lower hurdle to bring business on that works, whereas if it was all publicly traded companies handling the freight, it may not happen. So again, that's why I say the amount of business that we do with short lines is a positive for Norfolk Southern, because we have people that are willing to go out and find the business, work hard, maybe take a lower return over a short or longer term period to win the business, to be able to allow us to grow as well.
Let's go back a little bit to the Ancora again, not to talk about the battle, but when I would read press releases, the press releases came out endlessly, or listen to presentations. I was kind of struck by Ancora and Norfolk Southern talking about their different visions of precision railroading. That Ancora would essentially say Norfolk Southern's definition of precision railroading is not one that we agree with. And I will be honest with you and tell you that even by the end of that battle, I wasn't completely sure what the two different in approaches were. Maybe you can talk about, without talking about what Ancora believed, but maybe you can talk about the way Norfolk Southern sees precision railroading. Is it any different than kind of a general industry consensus? Or do you have something unique?
Yeah, having been in the industry now for over 2 decades, I will tell you, my career has basically spanned the entire length of PSR, and PSR can mean so many different things, right? I think everybody has their own definition. Even how it was implemented by the same person was different based on each railroad and based on what was happening at the time. So it's very hard to define what PSR is. So you're right, you end up with many different people have many different definitions. What I would tell you from my perspective in Norfolk Southern's is you cannot run a railroad in 2024 and beyond and expect to be successful without having the customer as part of the conversation, without having growth as part of the conversation. And I think, yes, it's important to focus on things like operating ratios and efficiency, but so much of the customer voice has been lost in the last 20 years. And that's why, again, you have small railroads, you have trucking companies doing so well in the freight market growing, but large railroads from a volume standpoint have generally not followed that same path. And so, again, when you look at what Norfolk Southern's future strategy is, it has to involve some sort of increased business through additional solutions, additional products, making rail easier, or at some point, again, cutting to growth, you're going to run out of options. We've done this for 20 years. There aren't a lot of hidden costs left to take out of the network. And I'm not just speaking for Norfolk Southern there, I'm talking for all the large railroads at this point.
Should the trucking industry be concerned? Is this a sleeping giant that's about to come in and grab market share?
No, I mean, look, we work with trucking companies all the time. I mean, intermodal is a very large piece of business for Norfolk Southern. So they are partners. Again, it's not coming in and saying it's this mode or the other. Customers, I think in general, want an efficient product, and most of those solutions come with different modes. And so I think from that standpoint, no, trucking companies shouldn't be concerned. I think what they should be is willing partners that are seeing what we're doing, collaborating with us, again, around our terminals, bundling packages together to shippers, so we can get the economy of rail, but with the service of truck, and working together, again, not just in intermodal, but in bulk and all the other businesses that railroads move, to be able to create a truck-like solution, but uses the efficiencies and the environmental friendliness of rail more.
Yesterday, I wrote the weekly story that I do for FreightWaves on the average DOE EIA diesel price that's used as the basis for most fuel surcharges. It was down for the 8th week in a row.
Yes, sir.
How much does that affect you? I mean, if you've got declining, right now the diesel prices I don't think would be considered historically low, but they're certainly not the one. They're not
downward trend.
They're not going to raise any eyebrows.
Yeah.
How much does that hurt or help you? I mean, if you've got diesel prices they're okay, they're not that terrible. Does that kind of slow that opportunity? Because one of the great arguments, of course, of the trains is that their fuel efficiency is so much better.
Yeah, certainly historically in lowering diesel price environments, that generally would be tough because, again, it makes trucking more competitive. But what I would say, with all of the ESG initiatives and everything with the environment, I think you have shippers that are starting to, be a little more inelastic to moving in those environments because they want to maintain that environmental advantage of shipping rail. But in general, the way we look at fuel prices is, we generally can't control them, obviously. We have fuel surcharges and other programs to try and protect us, in all the different machinations of that market. But, in general, it's something that we can't control. And with ESG, I actually think it's easier to compete now than it has been in the past.
And speaking of stories I write, this Friday I will write my monthly story on the employment report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mostly focus on trucking, but I also look at the rail numbers.
Yep.
They were stuck around 145,000 workers for a long, long time. It came down from about 180,000 workers before the precision railroading was introduced.
Yep.
Then it jumped up to about 149, 150, and then it's stuck again. And this is a criticism of the railroads, that they just aren't hiring enough workers. Is this because hiring anybody is tough these days? Anybody will tell you that? Or have we kind of hit a new plateau of workers? Does that really need to go up to get to that service level you speak of? Yeah,
it's a good question. There's a lot going on, right? So obviously the biggest factor in hiring people is demand. And if you look at the rail numbers right now, there's some, I heard green shoots earlier. I think that's a good description. There's some good things happening, but there are also some real challenges in the freight market for railroads. So overall, you don't see a big influx of traffic growth that would argue to hire people. I think the other thing you have to look at, and I'm speaking for all the railroads now, is that investor pressure, right? We got criticized by a bunch of folks, a bunch of investors, for agreeing to not furlough team members, right? We took a lot of heat for that. But again, that's part of our better strategy, and we continue to focus on that because we understand that we cannot ride a freight equilibrium that is impossible to catch. And so what you're talking about, the amount of time it takes to hire a conductor and train them safely and put them on the ground so they can throw switches in a safe, efficient manner, it is a long lead time. And so we can't continue to right size constantly because you'll always end up behind. And we spent a lot of time in December of 2022 talking to folks about that. Again, I think everyone on the street understood what Norfolk Southern was doing, but in the end, we still got criticized for it quite a bit in this latest battle, as you called it. So it is going to be an ebb and flow forever. I just hope that in the future kind of shareholder view, that they allow us to have folks to capture growth instead of trying to be perfectly right-sized all the time, because sweating assets is a PSR term that I think has caused a lot of consternation for folks in the audience and shippers and the rail industry in general.
You brought it in just as we hit zero. That was really impressive. So,
see how railroads are on time now?
I want to thank Stefan Loeb from Norfolk Southern for joining us here today at the Future of the Supply Chain.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you very much.
Very happy to be here. Thanks.